What's up, Achievers? Jason Pack here, and today we're going to talk about how to hip hinge like a boss. We recently put out a video called How to Deadlift, and I'll link that up here. And so this video is more for those who are having difficulty actually getting into the right position, the hip hinge position, while they're deadlifting. Now, we touched on hip hinging in that video, but in this week's Technique Tuesday, we'll actually break down exactly how you want to go about hinging throughout your hips so you're not compensating at your lower back. And so before you deadlift or hip hinge, what we're looking at are two things. We're looking at your active straight leg raise, and we're also looking at your toe touch. These two tests basically serve as prerequisites and let us know whether or not you're ready to hip hinge or not. So to perform the active straight leg raise test, what you want to do is lay on your back with your feet together, your arms by your side, and your palms lift up towards the ceiling. And from there, what you're gonna do is bring your toes up towards your shins and raise your right leg up towards the ceiling. At a minimum, what we're looking at is we want that ankle of the right leg directly in line with the kneecap of the down left leg. And this isn't just a hamstring flexibility drill. You'll definitely feel it in that right leg, but we're also looking at strength and stability in that right leg, as well as flexibility of the hip flexor in the down left leg. So it's just a good catch-all test in order to determine whether or not you have the general mobility and stability to get you in the right position in order for you to then progress to hip hinging. The second test we want to check out is the toe touch test. And this is your typical forward fold. We basically want you to get your feet all the way together, stand up nice and tall, and then from there slowly lower yourself down and reach towards the floor and see if you can get your fingertips to meet your toes. Now, if you can't meet your toes, the reason why this is important and significant before you hip hinge or before you deadlift is basically before you lower yourself and pick up a weight, your body needs to get comfortable just lowering itself without any load and be able to touch your toes. Now, if you can't complete the active straight leg raise or the toe touch test, don't worry, I've got two drills for you in order to help correct each of those movements. So a corrective drill we like to use with our members to help address the active straight leg raise is to have our members lay down on their backs. We want them to raise up their right leg with assistance using, let's say, a super band. What they're gonna do is they're gonna raise their leg up to a stretch level that's about a 6 out of 10 or so. Nothing too crazy, but it is giving them a decent stretch. What they're gonna do from there is they're gonna tighten that right leg, their quads, their hamstrings. They're also gonna push a little bit into that band. And from there, they're gonna hold that for 6 seconds. And then after 6 seconds, I want them to relax and breathe and actually use the assistance and pull into a slightly deeper stretch. And they're gonna hold that new stretch for about 10 seconds. They're gonna repeat that process about 2, 3, 4 more times, basically until they max out the amount of stretch that they can actually tolerate for that 10-second duration. Once they reach their stretch tolerance, what we want them to do is actually raise their left leg up towards the ceiling and then bring it back down. That helps to make the stretch a little bit more of an active one rather than just passively laying on the floor. If you can perform this drill about once a day or so, your flexibility will definitely start to improve, and then from there you'll be able to meet that test requirement of the ankle being in line with the kneecap. Now, if you couldn't meet the toe touch requirement, what we can do is something called toe touch progression. What you want to do is set up so that your toes are elevated on, let's say, a 2x4 or a couple of 10-pound plates. You're gonna have a foam roller or a yoga block or a rolled up towel between your knees. And from there, what you're gonna do is you're gonna raise your arms up towards the ceiling, and then I want you to slowly lower your arms down so that your hands reach towards the floor and reach towards your feet. And while you're doing so, try to squeeze whatever implements between your knees. Having the toes elevated allows you to sit back a little bit more, and having the roller between the knees also helps you to engage your core a little bit more. You want to perform this about 10 repetitions or so, and then from there, we actually want you to transition so that now your heels are elevated while you perform the same exact drill for 10 more repetitions. Having your heels elevated in this fashion helps to alleviate some of the stretch on your posterior chain and allows you to reach a little bit further than you normally could. Combining these two elements, you're able to improve your toe touch mechanics, and over time, you should be able to reach further and further and help get you to a point where you're touching your toes in no time. Now, once you can complete the active straight leg raise test as well as the toe touch test, we'd like to then move on to more of a stability-based drill. This next drill is called 2 mini band ins and outs. What you're gonna do is you're gonna place a mini band around your knees as well as around the arches of your feet. Set up with your feet about hip width to shoulder width apart, depending on how you stand for your deadlift. From there, what you want to do is allow your knees and your feet to collapse inwards, let the bands win, and then from there, very slowly, push out against the bands. What you'll find is that your feet start working, and your hip muscles, your glutes, start to trigger as well because they're pushing out actively against the bands. You want to hold this pose for about 2 seconds or so before allowing the knees and feet to come back in, and then again push out against them. You want to aim for about 8 to 12 repetitions or so. So now that we know we have the adequate mobility as well as the adequate stability to perform the movement, now we can actually go into hip hinging. Our favorite way to teach the hip hinge is to set someone up directly next to a wall with their backs up against the wall. We'd have them step about a foot away from the wall, and we'd have them bend their knees a little bit. From there, what we'd want them to do is push their hips back towards the wall and allow their torso to lean forward as they do so. As they come down, if their hips touch the wall, we'd actually have them step forward a little bit to increase the range of motion. You want to be able to find the position where they're the furthest away from the wall, but still able to touch the wall with their hips. There are 2 common mistakes we see when people perform the reaching hip hinge. Number 1 is that they allow their knees to come too far forward as they come down, and it ends up becoming more of a squatting movement rather than a hinging movement. What we'd have them do in this case is to elevate their toes onto 10-pound plates or some sort of elevated surface. What the elevation does is it basically maxes out their ankle range of motion, and it really prevents them from allowing their knees to shift forward, and really the only way they can actually descend down into the hip hinge is by sitting their hips back. The second mistake that we see is people not letting their torso lean forward as they come down. In hip hinging properly, your hips should shift back. Now, the only way to counteract that and not lose balance is to allow your torso to lean forward. So if you feel like you're almost falling backwards and your toes are lifting up, just allow your torso to lean forward a little bit more. And when you're hip hinging, just keep in mind you're thinking about the 2 minivan ins and outs. We want to keep your knees pressed out, your feet pressed out to the sides in order to create a much more stable base for yourself. Practice the reach the wall hip hinge and make sure that you can appropriately sit your hips back with your hips up high, your torso leaning forward, your knees and feet pressed out to the sides, and keeping good alignment before moving on to loaded exercises like deadlifts, kettlebell deadlifts, and trap bar deadlifts. Final progression before moving on to a barbell deadlift is actually deadlifting with a kettlebell. What you want to do is set yourself up so that your feet are on either side of the kettlebell with the handle in between the arches of your feet. You're going to imagine that again, you're reaching your hips back to a wall behind you, allow your torso to lean forward, grab onto the kettlebell handle tight, and then from there push into the floor and stand up tall. The reason why we like the kettlebell deadlift to start is because we can allow ourselves to step over it rather than deadlifting a barbell, which is in front of you. A barbell deadlift can place some more pressure on your lower back because it is out in front of you, and we want to make sure that we set up optimal mechanics first with an easier setup with the kettlebell before we progress to a more advanced movement like the barbell deadlift. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please hit that little thumbs up icon below, subscribe if you haven't already, and until next time, peace, love, and muscles.